My name is Dallas Bishoff, and it's my great pleasure to spend the next hour with you. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is a lovely place to be at, and this is certainly a fascinating topic. So, not necessarily well understood, but certainly an interesting management system to be able to dwell in. So this is the ISO 42001 management system, which deals with AI, and then the associated publications for AI risk management. I set the presentation up on the basis of, because it's not well understood, what things do people not know that they would like to know, especially if they're considering implementation of the standard or that they plan on attempting to get certified. And so in that regard, a little bit of background, and I've got a couple of slides that'll provide some introduction about my background here in a second. I spent time working with organizations and helping them figure out how to defend their systems. And the best management systems are implemented with the intent of defending it. So I almost teach my clients to basically think about it in reverse. How are you going to have to defend it and then implement it so that you can? And I say that from experience, the many years, beyond 15 years that I've been working with ISO standards. I've seen any number of cases where organizations have implemented a management system and they get into their certification audits and they can't defend it because they didn't create the evidence streams to be able to do that. And so I'm qualified as a certification auditor. I don't spend a lot of my time doing that. I'm more interested in working directly with the clients. But here's one of the things that I talk to my clients right away, and I have a sense of humor and I like to use and stuff, but this is really a reality. So I like to tell my clients that the first 10 minutes of an audit are like the first 10 minutes of a date. You kind of know how it's going to turn out. And being experienced as a certification auditor and working with clients and stuff, that's a reality. If you don't set the right impression with the auditor, then they're going to test their initial intuition about what you've got in ways that may not be comfortable for you, but their job is to figure out, do you have a proper implementation and stuff? And this is a very different management system. As I'll talk about through the course of the presentation, this is singularly the most complex ISO management system that exists out there, and we'll talk about that through the course of the conversation. I'll characterize that against like ISO 27001, which is not a simple management system itself. But for a lot of organizations, I've seen them get a copy of 27001, and as I would say, limp their way through the certification process. You'll not be able to do that. And I'm going to explain that to you and what it really actually takes to properly prepare your organization. And it'll be really sort of a representation of how complex 42001 can be. So, and then on sort of a roles and responsibility basis, with like 27001, the information security staff and the chief information security officer are responsible for that. And they try and drag the organization along for the ride. But in 42001, and certainly AI generally, it touches everything and is so pervasive these days that it creates some interesting challenges. And I'm going to introduce those topics to you as well. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and jump into the broader conversation. So here's a couple of interesting facts as background that you may find interesting. Since ChatGPT was introduced about 3 years ago, in the U.S. stock market for the S&P has added $24 trillion at about, and has gone up about 2,900 points. That's about $22 billion every single day of increase in market capitalization out there. And some of the other things that we see out there is that for the S&P 500 companies in 2023, 12% of them identified AI as a risk for their organizations. This year, that number is up from 12% in 2023 to 72%. And now the SEC is looking at instituting mandatory requirements for reporting on AI risk and stuff that's associated with it. So those are just a couple of background facts. Sometimes I get questions about, do you think that AI is a bubble? No, it's not. But here, let's go ahead and talk about the different details and stuff with this here. So just a second. Right, so a little bit about me. So I'm highly qualified in a whole number of certifications. I got the nicest compliment a couple of weeks ago. Somebody made a remark to me that they thought that I had more certifications than most people have browser windows open. But for the sake of questions, because AI touches everything, it crosses over into other areas like privacy management. And as you can see from the top, so I'm a fellow in the information privacy with the International Association of Privacy Professionals, privacy manager, CIPP for US and Europe, and technology cert, and I teach those. So I'm pretty competent in that area. Biometrics, which is a high risk area in the use of AI. I've got a detailed background inside of that, and then have held most of the ISACA certifications, but retired those last year. Spent time teaching cloud security, a variety of other things for IEC squared. But in the world of ISO, most of my focus is on what's sometimes referred to as the digital trust realm in that regard. And so 20,000 is service management, 9,001 is clearly quality management, 1345 is quality management for medical devices. 22301 is business continuity management, which has importance inside of AI implementations. I'll tell you one of the weaknesses that I see in a number of implementations, especially like MCP servers on agentic AI, is that they're not engineered for high availability. And if you're going to replace your existing systems with MCP servers, and they have resiliency issues, that critical system that you replace with agentic AI may not stand up the way that your legacy system would have. All right, 27001 clearly information security, and 27701, which was just updated, and some really fascinating aspects about that's privacy management. 37301 is compliance management, and then the point of the whole conversation here is 42001 related to it. So, and anyway, that may actually spark questions where you want to know how 42001 intersects with the rest of your world. I'll be happy to answer that for you. All right. In addition to that, and I should say, we've got some other folks that are attending the seminar who are also members of the ISO steering committee meetings. One of the reasons why I'm well informed is my participations on the ISO steering committees. Like 27 is the Information Security, Cybersecurity, Privacy Protection Committee. So 27001 and 27701 are managed by basically that committee. Next one down is 42, all the publications in the world of artificial intelligence, and it's hard, frankly, for most of the steering committee members to keep up with all the things that are coming out. There are a lot of publications that are now released. You'll see some of those in a moment. But there's a whole bunch of new things that are planned. The 42119 series on AI testing, including red teaming, is in process. And then the other, I have innovation management. I happen to believe that, so all things AI are innovation projects. When you're developing them, I don't think you really want them inside of the scope of your 42001 system. They'll cause problems because they're not ready for prime time yet. So you can use an innovation management system to start them out And when they're mature enough or hit the appropriate stage gate and stuff, you can flip them over to the artificial intelligence stack and let them manage and stuff. Of note, I sit on the committee that actually controls the ISO 1911 standard, which is how you audit management systems. I can tell you that probably about April, that 1911 is going to be updated. We just finished the technical edits and stuff associated with it, and it's just going through final stuff. And artificial intelligence is being used in blockchain and distributed ledger technology, and the committees have joint working groups and stuff where we try and harmonize some of the different activities and stuff out there. Anyway, that's a little bit about me. So I am a certified lead auditor, certified lead implementer, an instructor for 42001. I was in the original class to get people certified inside the United States, and that was about in March of 2024. So it's coming up on about 2 years and stuff. And there's been all sorts of things that happen inside the marketplace. Here's the agenda that we're going to run. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about perspective is everything and provide some background for you, and talk about some of the major challenges in the world of AI. And then we're going to apply that to 42001 and concepts related to risk management and basically getting started along the way. And so given the nature of the slide deck and stuff, there are going to be points where I'm going to cross the agenda to be able to pull content in at relevant points and stuff inside of here. So first thing I want you to understand is that there are many flavors of AI. So, really simple abbreviation, AI. But if you look at the diagram to the right, there's a lot of different flavors. And when we take the risk management context associated with it, those different flavors of AI have different problems that have to be managed. So, certainly agentic AI and all the different issues and stuff that's raising is completely different than some of the original symbolic AI stuff out there. In fact, I got a PhD in AI who got his PhD a long time ago. He's been doing AI for 40, 50 years. One of the interesting conversations that we have regularly is I'll point out some new article, and he'll remark to me, Dallas, we made that mistake 30 years ago. So, but if we go down to the bottom topic here on the problem of AI literacy, when we get down to that point, one of the challenges that we have is a lot of the folks out there don't know the history of problems. And so we're paying staff to learn those on their own, and it's not pretty, frankly. But anyway, each one of these are basically variations, and agentic AI is not really represented on here. So, and I don't think that we're done trying to develop different flavors of AI. It's a very creative world and stuff, but as one might say, that functionality is the enemy of security, and we're designing all sorts of functionality, and we don't really understand how it goes wrong yet. Which takes me down to my second point inside of here on AI is not intelligence. You think that that's kind of an oxymoron associated with this, but here, I'll throw in a couple of facts to help you understand my perspective about this. Recently, an organization attempted to give an AI system a standardized human intelligence test, which it failed miserably because AI only knows what it's taught. And because the LLM that it was interacting with, or the AI system that was interacting with, wasn't trained on a standardized intelligence test, it had no idea how to approach and reason its way through that. So, a lot of people think that it's just basically complete magic, and if AI says that that's the case, it must be true. But I could introduce you to any number of attorneys who've got themselves in trouble before the court, submitting a court brief or citations and stuff, that AI, because it aims to please, completely fabricated citations that did not exist. And there are a number of different cases like that. But now we've actually even seen the case where judges using AI to actually create rulings. There's at least 2 cases in the US where that's also happened with the judges. And so, you know, it's a little bit of a representation of today's solutions are tomorrow's problems, which is a systems thinking issue. And so systems thinking deals with emergent systems, and AI is an emergent system. Right. So because of that and many other reasons, the world of AI is very messy right now. And there's nothing, well, I won't say well, there's nothing. There's not a lot that we can do about that. So this is very much like cloud computing. When I teach cloud computing courses, folks will frequently ask me, Dallas, what do you think? Is cloud computing secure? And my general answer is no. But I'm a security professional. I don't really think that anything is secure. But the problem with cloud computing 15 years ago was a technology maturity issue. And that's what AI is going through right now, is that we don't understand all the ways that it goes wrong. And because of that, we don't understand how to stop that or manage or contain that. And so, you know, I don't have the time. We have so much ground and I had to be very selective about how I fix stuff. But if you write down the following, task rabbit, so T-A-S-K, and then rabbit, R-A-B-B-I-T, and Google that later on, there's a story about how things go wrong in unpredictable ways and stuff, and you'll find that story amusing. All right, but on bullet number 3 here, so, you know, it's sort of established that it's messy without providing a lot of detail, but, you know, you might wonder, what do you mean by poetic? And so recently, there is an adversarial attack that's referred to as basically poetic attacks, whereby changing the representation of the prompt, that you can trick AI into bypassing the guardrails. And that's not a flaw in design, it's a structural foundational issue. All forms of AI have been found to be susceptible to that, on a range of anywhere of 62% with some of the solutions that are out there, all the way to 100%, you know, with some of them being around 90, but 62% is already high. And there's nothing about, in terms of a flaw, that wasn't basically a mistake in the implementation. It's part of AI and the way that it thinks about stuff. You know, so it's a kind of analogous. This isn't the same example, but in a previous example, you know, they put guardrails out that basically said, you know, you can't, that AI shouldn't support a direct crime. So if you asked it, how could I murder somebody and get away with it? AI is not supposed to answer that if the guardrails are implemented properly. But in current implementations, if you change that and said, AI, I want to write a fictional story about murdering somebody and getting away with it, how would I do that? And it'll tell you, even though it just responded that I can't respond to a question about how to murder somebody. But now we've got hypotheticals, so it'll do stuff like that. Right, next question I get frequently, and generally when I'm working with organizations, they're concerned, the staff that's actually doing the AI stuff is worried, are we about to build the thing that's about to replace us? And that's not actually the history in the marketplace. So in current US statistics that were recently released, only about 4.5% of layoffs during the past year are directly attributed to being replaced. And those individuals in many cases can, you know, basically learn new skills and stuff. What we're more likely to see is that AI is going to rebalance the labor force. So here's a quick statistic. When they put AI in which is a completely appropriate use, into radiology for X-ray techs and stuff like that, the organization actually increased the number of technical staff that they had because AI could find at a high degree of accuracy the indications off of the X-rays, and then they were able to use the technical staff as the human in the middle or human in the loop representation to make the final determinations. And because they were doing it so much more efficiently and actually even making more money, they were able to hire more staff, and so you'll see cases like that. So, right, and then that sort of gets us down for the problem of AI literacy. In the recent representations, about 95% of companies are not getting positive ROI out of it. That's not happening because AI is not capable of creating positive ROI. It's a problem with the folks don't understand. So let's go back to my thing about we made that mistake 30 years ago. Because we're not training folks on how to use AI properly, companies largely are telling them, go figure it out. And they're making the same mistakes that we made a long time ago. When I say a long time ago, the Dartmouth conference or research project on AI, where AI got originally identified as a term, happens in 1956. By the 2000s, we got ethical and illegal outcomes with predictive AI that creates lawsuits. Governance, which we're going to talk about here in a second, starts to emerge roughly around 2015. So we've been making lots of mistakes for a lot longer than we've had governance out there. All right, so on a legal, statutory, regulatory roadmap, I'll point this out here in a second. There's lots of challenges in that area. Governance is, for a lot of organizations, a mess in a way that I'm going to characterize for you. The organizations, when you take the concept of data, basically garbage in, garbage out, AI life cycles and data lifecycle management becomes, if not more important, at least equally as important. And a lot of the organizations that I'm working with on 42001 do not understand data management and why it's important for their systems. In part, for instance, one of the reasons why you have erroneous outputs is partly because you have bad data inside of systems. All right, so let's talk about the governance topic inside of here. First thing I'm going to say is that a lot of times when I'm working with organizations, they want to explain their new, unique, novel approach to AI governance. And I'll ask them fundamentally, so what do you mean that you've got a AI governance program? Not that they shouldn't, but their representation is it was basically created out of thin air inside of here. And that's not the way to do it. If you're running AI as governance as a parallel implementation of governance inside your organization, you're getting it all wrong. It should be integrated. You should take your current governance program, or again, as I'll effectively ask them, are you telling me that you weren't doing governance at all before? So your governance should be integrated and not run as a parallel endeavor. You're going to get yourself in trouble, but more importantly, you're going to be completely inefficient and it's going to get in the way. So your governance program needs to be integrated with what you've got. You need to make sure that you set up roles and responsibilities, which in the world of AI generally means that you're going to need new roles and responsibilities. You're going to need adequate resources. Frequently, organizations don't know what that means. And that's one of the reasons, for instance, why in the Annex A controls, the resources is a separate set of controls to be able to make sure that your program does get governed properly. Here's an old adage: things that are under-resourced are at high risk of failure. So make sure that you pay attention to that area. I'll tell you that the auditors are interested in how that's going to happen. And then again, because you shouldn't be running a parallel universe, 42001 requires you to integrate your AI management system with your other organizational policies. It does that in a couple of places. that you want to see. So this diagram is coming out of ISO 37000, which is governance for organizations and stuff. And this is what I'm thinking about when I'm working with clients in auditing and stuff. I kind of look for questions, or I may pull up the diagrams, and do I think that the data and decisions or risk governance or different areas, are there weaknesses where the organization needs to focus on that? So again, I'd like to be able to explain more about this, but we have so many more things to talk about. So let's keep doing that. All right, different things that organizations are looking at are things like using, well, what if I use the NIST AI RMF and stuff? You can do that inside of 42001. But broadly, I'm going to say that I don't think that we have a master AI governance program that's been published that seems to capture everything. So right now, most organizations need to look at the different alternatives and figure out how to blend stuff together. But there's a governance section inside of the NIST AI RMF. It's got 5 categories and 17 total controls. Look at it and figure out what makes sense for you that you want to leverage inside of it, right? So this is the IAPP ecosystem for governance. This is really messy. But if you get on the IAPP site, you can click each of these boxes and it'll give you indicators of what they mean and why they think that it's important. I doubt that you're going to adopt this perspective, but I'm pretty positive that there's aspects of this where it'd be part of your ingredients to take to basically bake your own AI governance cake inside of here. One of the most recent things that got released is the Cloud Security Alliance just released an AI control matrix that takes 18 different domains and 243 controls, nothing that 42001 only has 38 controls. And gives you a different perspective about how you're going to manage risk. So these are basically control-based. But when you talk about risk treatment, or as NIST would call it, NIST response, it's the same thing. Inside of here, you're ultimately trying to get to risk acceptance. To do that, you're going to use risk mitigation. The way that you do risk mitigation is by using controls, whether they're security controls or AI controls or quality controls or whatever else. Then the other ways are doing risk transfer, and I'm going to mention real briefly. If you're using an insurance policy and there are now specialty AI insurance policies, you need to make sure that you don't violate the terms and conditions of your insurance writer. And there's been a couple of cases already where organizations have sort of found out that the problem that they created violated their terms and conditions. That insurance policy will not pay in that case. Right? So a couple of other things. So ISO basically oversees a number of roughly 26,000 standards that, across 175 countries, but there's only about 80 management systems, and they have a particular structure that we're going to talk about inside of here. So I've already mentioned it's the most complex system. We're going to talk about responsible AI principles here in a second, but when you get a copy of the slides, some example references. You don't have to use all of them. You have to figure out what's appropriate for you. And for instance, additionally, you could look at some of your peer competitors and stuff out there, figure out how you want to basically get through stuff inside of here to be able to identify your responsible AI principles. But these on the top of this slide are controls in Annex A that will require you to be able to demonstrate your responsible AI principles. So it's not like you just pick them and market them like snake oil salesmen. That won't be sufficient for the auditors. The auditors want to know, can you demonstrate that you actually live your responsible AI principles? And your responsible AI principles help you defend yourself if you get yourself in legal peril out there. And I'm not going to go through these one by one. Here's some publications. When I said before, you're not likely to get through 42001 certification audit and not read additional things. Here's different slides or on the slide, different ISO publications that are maintained by Steering Committee 42 to help folks understand stuff. And if we go down to like 24, 27 here on bias and AI systems and AI decision making, that's related to your responsible AI principles and stuff that you put in place. Right, other standards, so, as the old saying goes, but wait, there's more. So here's some other key publications and stuff. And, it depends upon your auditor whether they've got copies of these and whether they understand them or not. But you sort of have to anticipate that your auditors have an understanding of these areas. And to test your system or evaluate it, they're likely to introduce questions out of these publications. And if you think about some of them, so, like basically your A6, A7 areas on lifecycle management, data lifecycle management, I'm going to tell you that the 5338 standard's definitely going to come into play. I'm going to explain that here in a second. There's a visual representation for that. Other standards, which I don't have, no, actually do. So the 59 standard and 81 and 83 are all going to be important for you inside of here. Right, fortunately, so the ISO 42001 standard is designed using what's called Annex SL. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with that, but what Annex SL does is creates a standardized way of establishing a management system for clause 4 through 10 on the left. And the thing that's advantageous with that is it allows you to glue the management systems together if you've got more than one management system. In fact, you can create an integrated management system and have them all audited at the same time. And in particular, 27001 will be useful for you. Here's an epiphany moment. AI does not remotely understand how to defend itself. And because of the nature of the data that's handling and stuff, you're going to have a security program. So even if you don't have a 27001 implementation, the certification auditors in 42006, which is the audit and certification standard, requires the certification auditors to evaluate, do you have an adequate information security program? There's no place in 42001 that tells you that that's going to happen. But in 42006, it tells the auditors that they have to ask the question and determine, is that an area which creates a risk to your management system inside of here? Right, and then there's 4 annexes. We're going to spend a little bit of time with A, which is the 38 controls. B explains how to implement the controls. It's sort of basically like best practice guidance. You don't have to do it exactly that way. And then, I'm going to skip over C. We won't spend any real time on that. But D talks about the fact that AI, because of its nature, crosses over into other domains and sectors, especially for 9001, for 27001, 27701, which are on here. It explains why you may end up with an integrated management system. This slide's probably of interest to a number of you. The common question I get is, what's it going to take to actually implement it? Because it's a standard Annex SL management system, this is usually what I see. Your mileage may vary, but the management systems are set up using the Deming model, Plan, Do, Check, Act. And in that regard, so your plan to basically create the management system happens through clause 4 through 7. So, and we're going to talk about those in a second. Then you can basically turn it on, which is the do phase, and that happens at clause 8. And after it runs for a little while, you have enough evidence to be able to check it. So, and that's going to be your KPIs in 9.1, your internal audit function, and your management reviews. The 9 bar on the bottom is a representation of using agile processes to do the internal audit and build the KPIs as you go. And you can do management reviews earlier. So I recommend that actually you conduct first management review when you're ready to actually enter the do phase. because then you can approve the policies and the scope statement and the risk assessment and everything else and get that in place. And then ACT is basically, you take the stuff that you learn out of check and figure out how to make it better inside of here. But this is pretty consistent, and this isn't just unique to 42001. All the management systems kind of look this way. And starting at about month 2, you'll be able to start putting in your Annex A stuff as applicable inside here. Here's some of the other big challenges that we see with organizations, and this is completely unique. Aside from 27701 on privacy management, where you have data controllers and data processors, in the world of AI, there are different types of roles, and those roles are going to have to appear inside of your scope state. And you have AI providers and producers, and then you have customers and partners. So like my company, we're an AI customer, and under AI partners, we're an AI evaluator and an AI auditor. I don't actually do the provider producer stuff. And the importance with this is when you get to the Annex A controls in particular, it changes how you implement the controls. So you have to pay attention to this. It's explained. So again, as I said, you can't really limp along just off of 42001. You'll probably need to get ISO 22989. And in clause 519, they'll explain these different roles. Another thing real briefly, the roles in 42001 do not directly align with the EU AI Act roles. Those are different. But inside of clause 4.1, there's a provision in 4.1a. The very first thing it identifies in there is you're going to have to meet your regulatory requirements and stuff. Here's a quick explanation of this. Most AI systems, especially for the users, are black boxes. So in the lower right hand here, I'm basically, business understanding and use case. The users don't know, can't evaluate or decide on whether the AI system is going to get them in trouble, given all of the other things that appear on this diagram. Again, it's a black box. So I'm using it, I'm trying to trust the system, but I cannot actually explain to you why I'm right or why the AI system is right inside of here. Other things are the regulatory considerations, which I just mentioned. And so if you're going to operate on a global basis, you're going to need to pay attention to the international laws. And one of the better systems is inside this link, because there's so much going on, so much that being able to watch this is sort of problematic at a state level. And so Patrick Sullivan's joined us today, and Patrick, I hope you're enjoying the presentation. He just published on LinkedIn an article about the challenges with the U.S. marketplace. And real briefly, because of the 10th Amendment in the Constitution, those things that are not specifically enumerated for the federal government are the province of the states inside of here. So until, for instance, Congress determines they're going to invoke the Commerce Clause and create a uniform AI law, all of the states are basically doing it themselves out there. So here's another link to be able to watch that if it's applicable. I happen to know that we've got lots of people on an international basis. So for you, I think that probably the thing that I comment on is if you want to watch a humorous story emerge, watch what's happening with the states, because it's not remotely uniform and is going to create the same problems that we saw with privacy in that regard. Other different things inside of here. So as we move along, we'll get into clause 5, which is the leadership area. So setting a framework for your objectives in 6.2, I've not seen problems with that. On 5.1 on top management, which is a standardized term inside the ISO management systems, do not use a broad-based steering group, which would be called a governing body, to be able to act as top management. Top management should have line authority, should have control over the budget resources, and is responsible on a day-to-day, week-by-week basis to make sure the management system is achieving its objective. It is an active component inside the management system. It's not a steering committee that gets quarterly reports. You'll get yourself in trouble in an audit if you don't pay attention to that. Right, so other things inside of here are making sure that you set roles and responsibilities, which we talked about earlier. There's some guidance out there, like on the NIST AI, RMF talks about different types of roles that might be appropriate for you inside of here. In planning, this diagram basically is I put up because of clause 6.1.4, which deals with the AI system impact assessment, which is on the bottom of this. Organizations are having all sorts of challenges associated to their AI system impact assessments. And I was just finishing an audit where the organization followed the exact template out of 52,005. Great, happy to see that. But 42,005 gets basically, let's see, let me go down to here, basically is an input into the AI risk assessment, and they could not demonstrate how the AI system impact changed the risk assessment, how it would create an update to the risk assessment, or how the AI system impact assessment occurs inside of the risk treatment, in particular the controls. So the AI system impact assessment is dealing with both things that would harm individuals, groups of individuals, or societies. And the one thing that I'll say about a 42,005 AI system impact assessment, be careful with that, because you have to identify the harms that it could create. Make sure your legal staff reviews it, because it will be discoverable if something goes wrong. And you want to make sure that it characterized that you are aware and how you took care of it. The other thing that 42,005 makes you account for are the benefits of the AI system, and that's frequently overlooked as well. So 23894 is the overall risk management standard that we deal with. The other thing to point out when you're dealing with the risk management areas is risk occurs at different points in the AI life cycle. And so in the very beginning, in inception, you can't hack an AI system. It doesn't exist yet. And when we get to the far spectrum of retirement, the issue that you're worried about is basically media sanitization in cases like that. In the middle, different things happen. And so the risks change, and your opportunity to address the risks also change across the life cycle. So you'll want to take this seriously. The things that the auditors are looking for in particular is that in verification and validation, so 1 + 1 = 2. Does the system know how to actually do that? But because AI deals with weighted algorithms and other considerations, decision-making can be different inside of those systems. And because we're feeding in machine learning additional information in the system, what it thinks is the right answer can be different later on. So in the middle of here, where you go from deployment into operations and monitoring, and in particular, continuous validation and revalidation don't occur in normal SDLC models. Those are brand new, and organizations that haven't read 5338 and the associated documents and stuff don't understand those risks inside of it. Right, so other things inside of here. So, with 612, we need to make sure that we're taking the AI system impact assessment stuff and working that in. Other thing that's catching organizations off guard, but 42,001 explains this, and the auditors are going to ask, if you've got more than one AI system, they're going to want to know why or how did you make a decision on whether you needed one or more risk assessment. In the other management systems, you don't see this phenomenon. And down in AI risk treatments, you can have more than one statement of applicability for different systems. I could have an agentic system and a predictive AI system. They're being used by different lines of businesses for different purposes. So other management systems identify you can have more than one statement of applicability, but 42001 is probably the management system that's most likely to have that associated with it. Right, in objectives, big mistakes that folks make is they'll restate the requirements of the standard. The auditor should not let you get away with that. You have to do that anyway. The auditors want to understand what is the reason why you're putting the management system in place, not necessarily what the system or the management system says, and make sure it's measurable and achievable. That means sometimes you're going to actually achieve your objectives. They'll need to be retired and replaced and stuff. And then planning of changes should be pretty straightforward to understand inside of here. This area is pretty straightforward. In 7.5 on documented information, I see lots of cases where organizations extend their management system. Make sure that you account for that, and you're going to have to decide what you're doing about your Annex A controls. Almost every single one of the Annex A controls specifically says that the control has to be documented. There's lots of different ways to do that, like in ServiceNow on a workflow process that is technically documentation, but this is catching a lot of organizations off guard as well. The operations side, so with A2, A3, and A4, make sure that you understand what your planned intervals are and what would trigger an update associated with this. In 9, how are you going to basically set up your KPIs? The standard, actually none of the standards say this, but certification auditors know that they've got to ask for this. They expect that your AI objectives in 6.2 are incorporated into your monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. Internal audit program, your management review stuff is all pretty much standardized and the same. The improvement area looks like a lot of the other management systems, no real special things inside of here. So before we get to the Q&A section, as you can tell, I'm trying to cover key points and things that you wouldn't see inside of the standard. But we're coming up on 50 minutes past the hour, and we want to make sure that we've got some QA time. I knew that I could not actually create slides for 38 controls and stay inside a time limit, but there's a couple of them that are highly problematic that are causing challenges. So first thing with the AI incidents, here's my statement. AI breaks incident management. It does. So here's a quick representation. So an AI event can be a service event. That's possible. An AI event can also be an information security event. That's also possible. The AI incident can be both a service event and a security event at the same time. That's possible. Here's the fun part. An AI incident can be none of the other categories. It's completely unique. And an example of that is the recent OpenAI scenario where a chatbot talked a teenager through committing suicide. That under law is a reportable event. And most organizations haven't thought about this. I just had this happen with a Fortune 500 company that I was working with, and I mentioned this. And the organization said, man, we've been doing incident management for decades. What are you talking about? And they didn't understand the nuance and stuff that's associated with that. So I do advocate that you use the traditional stuff. So there's 3 general approaches: the NIST approach, the ISO approach, and the SANS approach in incident management. They're pretty similar. Use the ones that, you don't need to change your methodology, but you're going to need brand new categories of incidents, both for internal and regulatory reporting purposes, to be able to keep up with it. So I'll just go back to my original statement. AI breaks incident management. On the assessing the impacts of AI systems and the whole risk assessment side of that, if you get a copy of 5338 and read through it, you'll better understand what you're trying to actually manage. And if you haven't read that, your chances of getting your risk assessment stuff properly done and being able to defend it again is highly unlikely. Same thing with the data lifecycle side of it and stuff. And then I've mentioned already the problems with the impact stuff. So, all right, so that puts us at 50 pass. That gives us 10 minutes for Q&A. And so, as I was joking with Patrick Sullivan about before we started out, I was telling him this morning that I'm gifted, and most folks have heard this joke, I'm gifted with multiple personalities. So if you don't have any questions, actually, I wrote something down. So I'll get one of my other personalities to ask the questions and stuff. But with that, Desiree, so what questions were being sent in by the audience? And let's see which ones we're going to cover. But before we do that, I enjoyed spending time with you. I'll enjoy still the next 10 minutes and stuff. But feel free to reach out and stuff. Here's basically contact information while we're doing QA stuff. If you don't get an answer and stuff, or you have new questions after the seminar, send me an email message. I'm always happy to entertain stuff like that. Right, Desiree, what do you think? So what questions do we have that we want to introduce here?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dallas, for that insightful presentation. Actually, we have a lot of interaction from the audience, and I will start right away with the first question. I believe that this is a common question. I can address that. So this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our official website along with the slide deck. So as soon as we publish this recording, all the audience will be notified. So for the technical questions, we will start with the first one. And it says, the first question is, where will you advise organizations start step one if they're just beginning their AI governance journey?
I'd recommend actually using the diagram and stuff that I've got inside the slide deck. So I would characterize those as from the slide as buckets. Depending upon what your organization needs, you may lightly touch the different buckets in the graphic. And some other areas are going to be important to your organization in how you establish that. So again, I'll refer you back to the governance diagram that I put up, and just ask yourself common sense questions about, what does this mean for us? And then figure out how you get that incorporated inside the organization. The biggest problem that you see with governance is it's hard to figure out who not to involve. And at a certain point, it starts to look like a circus, So, you're going to have to set up basically a governance committee, and the committee should oversee the 42001 system through top management. Do not let the committee run the management system. It won't work. Right, next question.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your answers. So next question is, for organization just getting started with using AI tools, what are the basic elements of a proposed AI ML usage policy should be in place?
Well, that if I go back to the slide where their AI has lots of different flavors, it depends upon what you're trying to do with the flavor of AI and the implementation. I will say that inside of the series on machine learning, which is inside of the slide deck, which is a multi-part series, that getting access to that will be helpful. I'll also say real briefly. So the ISO management system standards cost money to be able to maintain. And I know that well because I have a $50,000 library that I use to help clients and do audit work. If you would like to see what they look like and what value proposition would be associated with that, get in touch with me and I can basically show you or talk you through things online, and you can make a decision about how do you want to get access to that. And so there's different ways to handle that. All right, next question.
Awesome. So how does ISO 4201 integrate AI risk assessment into organizations' existing risk management framework?
There are different approaches for that, but generally I find that most organizations need to have a separate AI risk assessment, a separate information security assessment. If privacy data is in the system, a separate privacy assessment. But probably the most common approach that I've seen in the marketplace to be able to roll that all up is the FAIR approach, FAIR, that's managed by the FAIR Institute inside there. But I'll caution you that the FAIR approach will not account for everything that a 42001 audit's going to ask for. For instance, there's a novel provision in 612 that doesn't show up any of the other management systems. You have to specifically account for the risks to your AI objectives inside of the risk assessment for 42001. Okay, next question.
Okay, so which industries in North America are likely to adopt AI risk management certification first? What are the market pressures do you think are driving this?
There's a couple of different, so I'm going to deal with the last portion of the question first. For the first time, and I've not seen this previously, one of the biggest proponents for putting a 42001 management system into organizations has become the general counsel for the organization so that they can defend the organization. They know that, especially in certain industries, and I'll say like insurance industry, financial services market, healthcare, other places like that, where AI can make a mistake and put the organization at legal peril. Inside of here, the attorneys realize that if they get dragged into court, they're going to need to be able to represent that the organization acted responsibly. So the risk management activities and maintaining their awareness of regulatory requirements is going to be central to that ability. Otherwise, industry-wise, this is really a case where organizations understand that they need to manage their risk or they don't. And so at an organization by organization basis, companies are going to make independent decisions with that, and I can't really give you a definitive answer. I could probably take a moment and explain all the ways that they'll get it wrong, but we don't really have enough time to focus on that. Next question. We still have a couple more minutes here.